There he is. Can't hear you yet. You're still muted. Yeah. You know.
Okay. Here,
Uh,
have I unmuted?
yeah, now I can hear you just
That's
fine.
it. Okay, good.
How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Yeah. Been a while since
Yeah.
I've seen you.
Yeah, that's probably good, Patrick. We don't need to see each other all too often.
That's true. People will start to talk, I think.
Yeah, let's start to talk, right?
We need some time
Can't
apart.
have that. Yes.
So it looks like you have kind of do you have a bad connection or
No, I don't think I have a bad connection. Why?
well, the video is a little slow, so it's not quite
Well,
catching up with you.
all I can say is that I had to go to a satellite dish because my internet provider wouldn't repair the cut to my cable in February. And so there was no way I could even have an internet connection unless I went to satellite.
Wow. Now you're pretty much frozen. Let's see. I can hear you. So the
Really?
sound is good.
There I am.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I look okay to
Do you?
me.
Okay.
You know, yeah. You look okay to me.
Okay. All right. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're kind of going
But
in and out of.
only six people that are ever going to watch this anyway.
That's not
And
true.
you and me are two. That's so that leaves four.
Hey, you know what? I have 2 minutes. Let me run back and grab a copy of I have an original Tularosa. So that might be a fun way to kick off our talk. I'll be right back.
All right.
Right. From the archives.
It's a nice shot of the vacuum cleaner behind your chair there.
You like that? And we got our
Yeah, I
water.
do. It's
We're in the
and the
bowels.
water. Yeah,
So what year was this? 96.
1996.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hold on just a second.
April 1996, and it's still available in hardback first edition.
Norton still has copies?
Yeah, they have a print on demand thing, and so when anybody wants a hardback Tularosa first edition, they whip it right out for them.
Oh, well, that wouldn't be a first
It's quite a
edition.
remarkable. It's a public. It's a very different publishing house than most outfits.
Well, they're like the last of the real independents.
They
It's
are. Well, they're entirely employee owned,
I didn't know that.
which
Really?
makes them. Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Well, here, let me get us going live and let's see here.
yeah. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry you had to work late to do this, Patrick.
Whoops. There we go. So that's good. And and that's good as well, I believe. Okay. Well, hey, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it is a real. It, I've been looking forward to this for a while because I was just. It's been almost 30 years since this publication right here, Tula Rosa, came out, and Michael, it's so great to see you again. For one, we're going to be talking, of course, about your brand new book, uh, Night in the City, but. Wow, I was just thinking about all the time. I remember your first signing. Was that your first book signing when you were here?
It was my first book tour. I think I had done a launch signing in Santa Fe, and then I flew to Phoenix, and someone drove me up to Scottsdale. The store was on Main Street at the time,
That's right. That's
and
right.
I think I did a signing with. I think I did. It wasn't a solo signing. I think I did it with that uh, husband and wife couple that lived in Corrales, New Mexico, that had a series going for a while. I can't remember their names.
Was that Amy and David Thurlow?
Yeah, I think you got it. That's it.
Yeah. I remember, I just have memories of it. I was still in my playpen at the time, of course, so I didn't understand what the adults were saying yet. No, I'm just kidding. I was about 25 and I remember a
You
circle.
you were you you were you were a kid. You were green behind the ears. You
We're,
were
we're both
fresh
kids.
into being a bookseller, and you didn't even know whether you wanted to do it or not.
That's right. But I remember we bonded immediately because there's so much great Southwestern history right off the bat in Tularosa, and of course through the whole series. And I'm a big student of Southwestern lore, and I remember talking about that stuff with you very early on. You know, but yeah, you've had such
I tried to weave that into all of my stories. I think there's a good bit of New Mexico history throughout the Kevin Kearney series, and of course,
yeah,
it's front and center in the American West trilogy.
absolutely right. Um, and so now, this new book called Night in the City. I'm just dying of curiosity. What it is a change in direction in some ways, but some of the themes that you've written about throughout your career appear here as well. But tell me about Night in the City. How did you first was this a book you always kind of wanted to write?
I can't say that is the fact, but let's back up just a little bit and take a look at the
Yeah,
fact that I have been moving out of genres in and out throughout my career.
yeah,
I did the 14 volume Kearney crime series. I did the prequel trilogy historical westerns. Then went and ended the Kearney series, and I did a sort of a not really a standalone, but a book that sort of was a spin-off to the series when I wrote The Long Ago,
right.
which really looked back on Kearney's wife's family history. And then comes Night in the City. So I've been jumping around genres my entire career, and it's been deliberate. But what made me write this story? All right, well, I used to say that when people would ask me if there was any connection between me and Kevin Kearney, for example, that no, Kearney was younger, better looking, smarter than I was. And I said that offhandedly, but in truth, as a writer, I've been using a great deal of my personal and professional experiences for the stories that I write. So, Night in the City, where does that come from? Well, Patrick, believe it or not, in the mid to late 50s, this country boy was moved to Manhattan, where I lived for 4 years during my formative high school career, where I got kicked out about three of them and finally graduated from one because I paid my way to go there. So I have a history of having lived in the city during a very transitional period in the history of that particular place. And so I was able to draw on a great deal of my personal experience of actually living and being part of that urban milieu for those 4 years. And this idea of doing a noir has always uh, appealed to me, and it was a big challenge. Now, what was one of the challenge technically was that throughout the story, except for the denouement, I use a single narrative voice. And as you know, because I know you've read my entire body of work,
I'm
that
sure
has
you
never
have.
been the case before.
Yeah.
I've always had points of view. I've always changed points of view. I've always been willing to change points of view within a scene, much less within a chapter. So this was a challenge. And that's the other issue that drives me as a writer is I always want to do something different. I want to do something new. I want to push the boundary. And with Night in the City, I've done that probably twice over compared to what I did in the Long Ago and even what I did in the American West trilogy. So now you have my motivation.
Yeah, I wanted to pay you a compliment. This book has, it has the feel of being written in the period. A lot of novels that are kind of, historical novels set in the past, you're very aware while you're reading it that this is a modern voice telling a story set in the past. When I read this, I felt like, wow, this could have come off the shelves in 1953. I mean, this really has the feel of that era. So there you
Well, I
have it.
really appreciate that. That's a great compliment. So thank you for it. And of course, I mean, I remember having, going home and having to change my shirt because the grit on the back of my collar had just totally blackened it. And the humidity was absolutely awful. And the streets were crowded and the city was dirty and there was all sorts of things going on around you that were not only exciting, but in some cases scary. The juvenile delinquency thing was happening. Remember, look at the romanticized version of West Side Story, right? For
Yeah,
example. So
yeah.
there were the Puerto Rican gangs, there were the Anglo gangs, there were the mobsters, there were the crooked, dirty cops. I mean, it was all around you. And it was in the New York Daily News, and it was in the Herald Tribune, and it was in the Times, and it was the Times. And that was the Times I lived through during that era. And so thankfully, I was able to bring that back alive and put it on the page. And I think it worked quite well,
Where did you
modestly, he says.
where did you live when you were in New York during?
I lived in Manhattan. In fact, I lived in Yorkville, which is one of the major scenes in the book. I also lived for a time on the Upper East Side, slightly above where the Museum of Art is. So I've had both of those neighborhood experiences.
Well, can you give us, I mean, this is a book where we don't want to go too far into the plot, but can you give kind of the basic setup? Maybe who Sam Monroe is and who Laura, and I couldn't help but think of the classic Laura of film fame and Vera Casper.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, let me surround that with a little bit of talk about what to me a noir is, what a noir novel is. And you've got to have some damaged people in it, and
yeah.
you've got to have some morally corrupt people in it. And it's always good to have a femme fatale in it too, and and some sort of prevalent crime that drives the narrative. So what this story is about is a slightly not quite hard-boiled protagonist who interestingly doesn't even like guns, but is a decorated combat vet from Korea who engages in this steamy, passionate love affair with this society woman, this beautiful woman who can't help but fall in love with, in spite of the fact that their unspoken agreement is that that could never happen and should never happen. And so here he is, after she has broken up with him, still pining for her in a way, even though he gets on with his life and becomes an assistant district attorney. And out of the blue, she calls and says she would like to see him. Let's meet at our old rendezvous. And he goes and waits and waits and waits, and there's a no-show. So his quandary is, does he do anything about it or not? But because of his feelings for this woman, he can't resist. He's got to go to her place where she lives, her penthouse apartment on the east side. And lo and behold, he finds her dead, strangled, with evidence that he is the perpetrator, that he's the killer. And so the only thing he can
Dog
think to do
tags.
at the time is to just get out of there and try to find out who killed this woman that he cared for, because he knew he would be the number one target. Well, you take that and you mix it with some dirty cops, one especially who has a vendetta against him.
Right.
You include some corrupt cops who are doing terrible things unknown to the public, and some mobsters and mafiosos who have
Yeah.
agendas of their own, particularly one who happened to be Sam's lover, former lover. In other words, Sam's dead girlfriend's former lover. So you mix it all up, and what do you have? You have a noir, especially when you put it into New York City in the 50s. It just worked. You've got the bleak streets, you've got the mean streets, you've got the corrupt cops, you've got the mafia, you've got a vendetta going, and you've got a guy who's trying to not only save his career, but save his life and find out who killed this woman that he cared for. It's got touches of Mickey Spillane to it. It really does. If you read I, the Jury, you'll see there's a little thread that works there that has a certain similarity to Night in the City. What I like to call Sam is parboiled. He's not hard-boiled, he's parboiled. So where's his weakness? Where's his Achilles heel? Well, he's impulsive. He doesn't think things through completely. He does things thinking he's doing the right thing when it actually is making it worse for him. And he hooks up with this mysterious female private detective who has an agenda of her own that he can't figure out, but he's yet attracted to her as she is to him. And what's that all about? And where does that come from? And what's the history to that? And how does this all unravel? So I think I've told you enough of the story that it would capture somebody's interest, I hope.
Well, and then behind, a lot of noir, at least kind of in the Chandler sort of version of noir, there's got to be a lot of money somewhere behind it as well. And there is in this case too.
And yeah, there's a lot of money behind it, both in terms of illicit profits, illicit gains, in terms of the dead woman, Laura, who comes from a family that goes back to New Amsterdam, not just
Right.
New York, but New Amsterdam, who's incredibly wealthy. It brings in politicians, the mayor, the police commissioner. It brings in a columnist for the Herald Tribune. It just revolves around the whole social milieu of New York City in that era.
Right. And then, I wanted to get into a little bit into your work, before you became a writer full time. There's a lot of psychology in this book, kind of underneath the surface. When we learn
Oh,
more
it's right there. I don't even think it's under, I think it's right there. I think it's right
right
there in
there.
the reader's face. I mean, it's undeniable. Well, who was this woman? What motivated her? What made her be who she was and what she did? And what does that say about not only her, but about Sam in terms of his reaction and relationship to her and how he was drawn into that and to such a total degree that he could not break away from her.
Well,
So yeah, there is that to it.
yeah, and Laura, um, she's much more than someone you'd see coming out of central casting. You know what I mean? As far as an ingenue kind of character, or um, she's a photographer, which I found really interesting, and
Mhm.
had her own dark room in the basement of her building, and she
That she
has,
owned. Yeah.
well, her family owned, right?
No, it's hers. It was her building.
It's her building. Okay. I
Yeah.
thought it was her family's, but yeah, really interesting character, very, very complicated, and part of the book is kind of course, unfolding the layers of Laura, her history and her past and what happened to her when she was a kid and all sorts of different things. Um, but yeah, and she had, this is very early on. Our Sam removes a couple of items from her apartment to help in his investigating, right? And
Right.
one of them was the diary, right? And I'm trying to remember
One
what.
was a diary, exactly.
Yeah.
An address book, a diary. I can't remember what else it was, but yeah, he does that. He does it. One of the things, though, that I think you need to clarify for yourself is that yes, this is a very complex, interesting woman, and she's dead in the first chapter. You never see her alive. You never
Right.
see her on the page as a living character. It's all who she was and what she was before. And so that has a whole different dimension to it because you're learning about the life of someone who isn't even there anymore.
And
And I found that very interesting to try to do.
it's also told through these various different mirrors, I mean, Sam had his perception of her. DJ, who knew her much longer, had a different perception. And so you get all these different mirrors of what she was, what she was like as a person.
Mhm.
Yeah, very, very, very compelling and interesting. But yeah,
I'm very happy with the book. It was a lot of fun for me to write it. I totally enjoyed being able to finish it up and have it be as tightly woven as I wanted it to be. Usually in my previous crime novels, Patrick, you probably remember, I didn't try to hide who the antagonist was.
mhm,
To me, it was never necessary for my books to have a riddle to them or to have a mystery so complex or so involving that you wouldn't know early on whom the bad guy might be.
right.
And so I've never felt that I needed to ever do that. I always thought if the story is compelling enough, what matters isn't so much as trying to puzzle out who did what to who, as much as it was because they were police procedurals, as much as
Yes.
it was what the officers, what the law enforcement personnel have to do to get to that conclusion, to make that conclusion stick and to make it real. In Night in the City, it's a mystery. It may be my really first mystery insofar as nothing gets revealed until the right time.
Yep.
And then, oh, that makes sense. And so it works out that way. So that was new for me, and it was a lot of fun to do.
Well, yeah, you present through the notebook that she kept of her various conquests. I think there were 20 or 21 men, and then he's able
Right.
right away to kind of, um, you know, take a bunch of them off the table. And then so we're down to this sort of cast of possibilities. And there's that whole framework of it. But Sam himself, as you say, he's not. you start to look at him, or at least as I was reading the book, I started to read him as a private investigator, as a classic kind of Sam Spade, sort of character. But then
Mhm.
you realize he's not really like that. There are elements, he's kind of a natural when it comes to investigation, but as you say, he makes some wrong moves, and he doesn't have all the classic stuff, the sense of um, he's not the knight errant, he's not a Philip Marlowe.
Right, and on the other hand, he's not the cynic. He's not the broken cynic who has this bleak worldview of not only himself but everybody around him. He's still a guy that's got some. He's got a good core, uh, and I think he stands up in that regard as a little bit different from your normal. Noir PI. He's not a Humphrey Bogart type or a Robert Mitchum type or any of the newer categories of noir type characters that they are. So yeah, he's different. He's a little bit more better wired, I think would be a way of putting it.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about, well, is this book really a noir? It's definitely got elements of noir, with that sort of fatalistic worldview, you know. I mean, the classic noir setup is, somebody by desperation or whatever makes a really bad decision, and then the book is watching the downward sinking of that
Yeah, the
that
downward
mood.
spiral,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and so the noir.
Well, call it a post-noir then. Yeah, call it a post-noir. You
It's
know,
definitely a heart. I would definitely call it a
I
heart
I just
boiled.
did a yeah, I just did a thing for the Strand magazine where they asked me to talk about noirs that I particularly enjoyed and liked and why I liked them. And one of the things I said right at the top of the article is that how you define a noir is really debatable.
Absolutely.
And so these are the elements that I think are important, but you can argue it. You can argue the point, especially in uh, fiction noir, not in film. In film noir, I think it's a little bit more rigid and a little bit more codified. But in book form noir, I think you have a lot more flexibility in how to define what a noir really is.
Sure.
And so that's my take on it. That I think it fits within the genre, although
Absolutely.
I'm not even a fan of genres.
It's very cinematic too. When you're reading it, I'm picturing you do a good job of kind of giving us just enough to where you can really see these folks walking around and operating. Um, did it take, I know you lived it, you were there during that time period, as a real young guy. Did you go back at all and kind of do any just checking on research of period New
Well,
York?
I've been back so many times, I couldn't count them. Of course, I know all the neighborhoods I'm writing about. So yeah, I went back. I didn't go back necessarily during the time that I was actually working on the book, but I've walked those streets, and the streets that I talk about, well, some of them have changed, some of them are still quite the same. So I was able to uh, just make sure that what I was writing about was accurate for the period.
Yeah,
One of the interesting bits in this book was after World War II, in the late 40s, they built a 12-story apartment building. No, excuse me, not an apartment, a department store, a 12-story department store that was almost next door to St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue, right? That department store was called Best and Company, and I have it in the book, right? And I describe it perfectly because my sister worked there as a sales clerk in that department store. Now, what had happened to Best and Company? It was built in 1946. By the middle 1970s, it was destroyed. When it was built, it was the most modern air-conditioned, beautiful new department store on Fifth Avenue. It didn't even make it 20 years before they tore it down to put up something bigger, right?
Right.
So I'm able to talk about something that most New Yorkers walking around Manhattan wouldn't even know had existed at that point in time. Wouldn't have even known that in the 1950s there was this department store that competed with Macy's, with Bloomingdale's, with Lord and Taylor, with Saks Fifth Avenue, with every department store that made it in the city at that time. You know, so
Wow.
it was just a lot of fun to draw up those memories of things gone from the past and put them in the book.
So how old would you have been roughly when you were living there at that time?
I left there when I was 18.
Oh, you left when you were 18? Okay. Because I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
wow. I mean, that's when all those jazz clubs, were really, really in.
And I would sneak into every one of them.
Did you
Me
really?
and a
Oh,
couple of my buddies. Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They'd let you in. This was not, New York was wide open. You know, you could go to the Village Voice. You could go to any jazz club in Manhattan and get in. It didn't matter. You know, I can remember being in the bathroom, in the men's room at one of these nightclubs and turning and looking and seeing Dizzy Gillespie at the stall next to me,
oh
right?
my God.
And I'm there with one of the great jazz musicians of the era, you know, saying, "Whoa, this is very interesting." So I had a lot of experiences like that. It was a different time for adolescence in the city. The city was wide open. You could buy cigarettes, you could buy liquor, you could get into jazz clubs, you can get into all night, you can get into a lot of trouble, you know, and that's why I spent most of my career in high school moving from one high school to the next because I kept not going to school and going out and having a lot of fun with my friends. So it was even amazing that I absolutely was able to graduate from high school. It was a feat, true
Yes.
accomplishment.
So yeah, Village Vanguard in its prime, the Five Spot, all these wonderful,
Yep.
iconic,
Blue Note.
the Blue Note for sure. Um, it's funny, this would have been in the late 80s. I was a teenager and we went to see Dizzy Gillespie here in Phoenix area at Gamage Center. And he was, towards the end of his life by that point. But that was
Mhm.
a thrill getting to see him, then. And so that was really kind of as you say, the would it be the beatnik era? Kind of, it was definitely
Oh
pre
yeah, it was. It was the beat era. It was right. It
the
was,
beat era.
it was around 1955, 56 that rock and roll began to blossom. You know, I think Presley was around at that point. He was just making it big, right? And the rock and roll was, the boy groups, the girl groups, the vocal groups, and bebop was very popular. You had all sorts of things going on, but it was infused with that early 50s music. You still had Sinatra, you still had uh, people like Connie Francis singing. And
So,
there were, you know, Billie Holiday was there, and Harlem was jumping with
oh
jazz,
man.
and so it was a real, um, it was a foretaste of what happened in the 60s. It was a blossoming uh, of an alternative sort of lifestyle that was coming to the fore more and more. You can see some of it in some of the movies that were made around that time that sort of featured it. But yeah, it was a very vibrant time in the city when the city hadn't become the Big Apple yet, hadn't turned into this huge uh, city with these incredible skyscrapers. You could still see the sky in the city in the 50s. if you were living in Manhattan. You weren't totally surrounded by the 40, 50, 60, 80-story skyscrapers that are there now. It still had a more of a feel to it then, and I would compare it to London. London
Okay.
still has that open feel to it when you're in the city. And that's the way Manhattan felt in the 50s. But of course, that's a bygone era. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah, I imagine it still had, kind of that pre-automobile vibe in some neighborhoods or, I can only imagine. In the 50s,
Well, the
yeah,
traffic was always awful. The traffic in Manhattan was always awful, you
it's
know.
always
Uh,
bad.
but uh, no, the neighborhoods, there were neighborhoods in Manhattan where people have lived their entire life without ever having left it. The
Yeah.
neighborhood. Not even getting off the island. They'd never left the neighborhood.
Hmm.
And that's the way Yorkville was when I lived there.
There's a really terrific writer named William Boyle. I don't know if you know him, but he's writing now, and he's done this series of it's not really connected series, but all of his novels are set within a very particular neighborhood in Brooklyn, and most of them feature different characters, that have a little bit of crossover, but it's like this Balzac kind of approach, where it's just focusing on
Uh-huh.
one neighborhood. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Well, let's
It
get
does
into
sound
it.
interesting.
Yeah, I'll email you with some of the details about him. I think you might enjoy him. Um,
Okay,
let's
sure.
talk a little bit about because that's really we've probably said too much about the book, but um, you're all going to love it, folks that are watching. It's a real treat. And let's talk a little bit about your career before, because you've had a very interesting life. Talk about what you did before you became a writer, before you became a published writer.
Well, I did a lot of things, Patrick,
I
and I
know.
guess they infused my writing, but I've been a deputy sheriff, I've been an investigator for public defender. I've run criminal justice programs. I took over a jail when I was a deputy sheriff, where the staff had created a lockout. I had to clean that out. I started drug abuse treatment programs. Worked with chronically mentally ill patients coming out of prison and jails and mental health institutions. Uh, Worked in LA and in East LA and in the Watts area after the riots as a social worker. Uh,
Really? I didn't know
I
that.
did a lot. I did a lot. Most of it was in one way or another tied into the criminal justice system. But I will tell you this, that very few people know about what was I doing in New York City in the 50s. Well, Patrick, I was a juvenile actor. And I acted off Broadway. I did some live television. I went to a private school my senior year called Professional Children's School. Some of the students that were enrolled while I was there, Christopher Walken. Later on, students like uh, Charlotte Scarlett Johansson are graduates. Milton Berle went there. In fact, they have me listed as one of their distinguished graduates. You can
No
get on their
kidding.
website and check it out. Yeah, get on their website
I
and
did
check it
not
out.
know
You
that.
will find me listed, and you will have me listed as a distinguished graduate for Professional Children's School. This is a school that it's a private school. I paid my way through it by the work that I did as an actor and as a singer, because I sang in some professional choirs. And this is a school that caters to athletes, musicians, actors, dancers, people in the arts. That's all it's designed to serve. And if you look at that school and you look at the alumni from that school, you will see dozens and dozens of recognizable names, from Milton Berle to Elliot Gould to Christopher Walken and yours truly.
What's it called
So
again?
that's what I did when I was in New York. What?
What's the school called again?
What? What?
What's the school called again?
Professional children's school. Professional children's school.
Okay. Gonna have to look that
See
up.
if I'm telling the truth. Look that up. That's a bit of history that most people never knew about me until I wrote this book.
I'll be damned. Wow. What
Yeah,
sort of roles did you do as a kid?
juveniles, mostly delinquent, some off-Broadway stuff that was not memorable, some walk-ons, some five-liners, uh, some extras. You did everything. I read for Broadway plays, I read for off-Broadway plays, you know.
Now, how about as an adult? Did any of that follow you? Did you do
No,
it?
no. Oh, yeah, I did some theater in California after we left New Mexico. We had some fun doing some semi-professional theater in Southern California. I directed a few plays. I even cast my wife in a couple of roles that she played. Uh, I didn't do much direct acting. I was having more fun directing than I was acting at that point. But I did it purely for the entertainment, for the enjoyment of doing it.
Now, what did your father do?
Oh, I don't like to talk about him.
Oh, no? Oh,
Did you ever see Death of a Salesman? Did you ever
yes.
see Death of a Salesman or read the play
Yeah,
by
of course.
Willie Loman?
Willie Loman.
Yeah,
That was your
okay.
dad.
Yeah, Willie Loman. Yeah.
So that was kept you
Not
traveling
a
around.
happy, not a happy life. Not a happy life.
Yeah, that's too bad.
He
But
was the one who wanted to be the star, not me. He wanted to be the star. Yeah.
was he in the war?
Hmm. No, draft dodger.
Gotcha.
Job working in an aircraft factory.
I see. Okay. But you've been in New Mexico
Not a
for
pretty, not a pretty picture. What?
you've been in New Mexico for a long time though, right?
Yeah, yeah, over 6 decades.
Yeah,
It's been home for over 6 decades.
right. Well, what else can we get into here? What are you working
That's it.
what are you working?
What am I working on? I'll give you the working title, okay? You want to know the working title? Of course you do.
Yes.
The Sudden Rotation of the Moon is the working title of my work in progress.
What can you say about it? Anything? Or would you rather not?
The love story. It's a love story
Where's it set?
everywhere. No place is identified. The characters have no names except for a couple of them. And where they go and what they go is everywhere and nowhere and anywhere.
Oh, very intriguing. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if I can pull it off. It's a bitch.
Are, are you how far into it are you?
I'll have it done this year. I
Yeah?
I I want I don't have it sold yet, but I
No?
should have it done this year. Yeah, no.
I like it. That sounds really good. Let me look at some of these questions because we do have some that
Novella than it, it's more a novella than it is a novel. It's a shorter work. It's not going to be 80 or 100,000 words.
okay. A question just came in, which is the love story based on you and your wife?
Which love story?
I'm assuming
Which one?
the one you were just talking about.
Well, I can't say. Uh, uh, yes and no. Yes and no, of course. I mean, what love story could I better tell than the one I've lived, you know, to a certain extent. But I would say it's not a fictionalized version.
Mm.
It's what I draw upon. I draw upon certain things. There's certain things that my wife has said or done that I've put into this story simply because I find them enticing and in some cases humorous. So, you draw from your experience. I draw from the experience of my relationship, but it goes beyond that. It has to go beyond that. Otherwise, it's what is it? Just a memoir fictionalized, and I'm not writing that.
See what else we have here. Um,
I've got
Renee,
to tell you, Patrick, I really hate these things. They're terrible. I never think I ever do a very good job. And once we hang up, I'm going to go out and my wife will be in there and she'll say, how did it go? And I'll say, who the knows?
I think it's going great. Yeah, let's see. Okay, so we can just ask a few of these. Renee would like to know, I'm not sure where she's getting this. Do you still have a pet rabbit?
Never had a pet rabbit, ever.
No?
I've never had a pet rabbit. No. I've
All right,
had I've had
all right,
chickens, I've had
Renee,
horses.
this is getting surreal then. Okay. Renee, I don't know where you got the idea that he had a pet rabbit, but he does not have a pet rabbit. Um, let's see. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to ask any of these questions. Oh, well, one just came in.
You
Would you
know,
ever,
you don't
would you ever consider writing a memoir?
absolutely not. Uh, And there's really only one good reason for it, and that is that even though I've shared parts of my personal life tonight with you that few people in my adult life have ever known about, uh, in most ways, I am a very private person, and I like it that way. And I really would never do a memoir, and I hope no one will ever try to do a biography. I'll try to erase as much of my life as I can, so that's impossible for them to do.
What do you remember, happen to remember what Keats's epitaph was or on his tombstone? It said something like, "Here lies a man whose name was written in water." That's a great sentiment.
That's a great, that's
Yeah.
great, that's great.
Yeah. All right, Michael, I'll let you off the hook. I won't interrogate you any further, although I'm dying of curiosity about certain things. Um, but a lot of it comes out in your work, a lot of your experience and your personal stories come out in your novels, obviously. Um, by the way, did you happen to get a shipment of these for us to autograph?
No, no,
You have
no,
not? Oh, I know that
no.
Barbara had set that up. Anyway, um, I assume it's okay if we send you some books for you to sign.
Oh yeah, sure, but no, I have not gotten a shipment
Okay. All right.
the publisher.
Yeah.
So,
And
but
before,
sure, send me some.
yeah,
I'll
definitely.
be glad to do it. We've done it before.
Before we went live, we were just talking about Norton, and kind of the last of the real true independents, at least of the big publishers. And what a great publisher. You've kind of come full circle. You started your career with them, and now you've come back to them for the last
I
what,
am so
3 or 4 books, right?
This will be my fourth. This is my fourth book back with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, this will be my sixth book overall. But yeah, they were the house that broke me into print, and I
Yeah.
was really delighted to be able to return to them. And it's been a joy to work with them. They're really a great house, and I'm very appreciative of the support they've given me.
Right. All right, Michael. Well, hey, thanks so much for talking with me today. It's always good to see you. I hope we get to see you in person again at some point here. Um,
That would be nice. I don't know if I can pull that off. I'm getting old, Patrick. I'm getting old.
you don't look it. You look great. You look spry,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
ready
I'm
to
still standing.
kick ass and take names,
Yep.
right? All right.
Right. You take care of yourself.
You too, Michael.
Say
Thanks so
hello to
much.
everybody.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
And
We'll have signed copies of The Night in the
thank you for
City
having
very
me.
soon. All right. Good night.
Good night, Patrick. Thank you.
You bet.